Hello viewers, our today's topic is Inflation and Unemployment Trade-off, Phillips Curve. Today we will cover topics such as inflation and unemployment as a major concern for an economy, inflation and unemployment trade-off with the help of Phillips Curve, and short-run and long-run Phillips Curve. So friends, let me introduce Phillips Curve for you. The Phillips curve is a curve that shows the empirically fitted relationship between the rate of change of price level, that is inflation, and the rate of unemployment. It expresses an inverse relationship between the rate of unemployment and the rate of increase in price level, what we call inflation. British economist Phillips derived the empirical relationship that when unemployment is high, the rate of increase in price level is low. This is because workers are reluctant to offer their services at less than the prevailing rates when the demand for labor is low and unemployment is high, so that price level fall very slowly. Inflation is a highly controversial term, which is also a major concern for a growing economy like India. Inflation is a galloping rise in prices as a result of excessive increase in the quantity of money. But Keynes, in his journal theory, denied this phenomena. Instead, he argued that there was always full employment in the economy, which resulted in hyperinflation with increase in the quantity of money. According to him, there being underemployment in the economy and increase in the money supply leads to increase in aggregate demand and output and employment, and hence rise in journal level of prices. But Keynes' theory failed to explain the poor condition of world economy during World War II. And there is when neoclassical economists define inflation as inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomena. Labor is yet another driving force in every economy. Wages paid for labor and the output of labor is essential for companies. Likewise, unemployed workers represent unused resources within an economy, and hence unemployment is a major and significant concern within various world economies. Every economy keeps close watch on the rate of unemployment prevailing in the country. This rate of unemployment gives the ratio of non-employed workforce among the employable workforce. Hence, it gives a big picture to the policy maker on how many jobs to be created in order to bring unemployment ratio down. However, lack of effective aggregate demand of labor is one of the principal reasons for unemployment. Especially in the less developed economies, a substantial portion of the total workforce works as surplus labor. This problem is very prevalent in the agricultural sector. So friends, let us now understand inflation-unemployment trade-off Phillips curve. A.W. Phillips had worked historical data of UK and had arrived at the conclusion that there existed an inverse relationship between rate of unemployment and rate of inflation. This inverse relation infers that trade-off, that is, a low level of unemployment can be achieved with increase in general level of price or in the form of a higher rate of inflation. And in order to reduce the rate of inflation, one need to pay prices in terms of a higher rate of unemployment. On graphically fitting a curve to the historical data, Phillips obtained a downward sloping curve exhibiting the inverse relationship between rate of inflation and rate of unemployment. And this curve is now named after his name as Phillips curve. Let us understand the same with the help of a figure here. It shows that Phillips curve where along the horizontal axis the rate of unemployment and along the vertical axis the rate of inflation is measured, it can be observed that when rate of inflation is 9%, the unemployment rate is 2%, and when rate of inflation is reduced to 4% per annum, say by pursuing contractionary fiscal policy and thereby reducing aggregate demand, rate of unemployment increases to 9% of labor force. This is how Phillips curve was derived. This empirical data proves that there existed a stable Phillips curve which depicted a predictable inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. Thus, on the basis of a stable Phillips curve for a country, the trade-off between inflation and unemployment was emphasized, which confronted the economic policy makers. However, the trade-off puts the policy makers in a more awkward situation where they need to choose either of two. One, a higher rate of inflation with lower unemployment, or two, a higher rate of unemployment with a low inflation rate. Let us now learn the explanation of Phillips curve by the Keynesian economists. As Keynesian economists have assumed that there is an upward sloping aggregate supply curve, that is, as the economy approaches near full employment level, the AS curve slopes upward. There are two major reasons of AS curve to slope upward. Firstly, because of law of diminishing returns to variables, as labor force increases, the marginal physical product of labor falls due to diminishing marginal utility. Since the wage rate W is constant and given, fall in MPPL will lead to increase in marginal cost of the production, that is MC is equals to W by MPPL. Secondly, the rise in marginal cost is also due to increase in wage rate as a result of increase in employment and output. Thus, the rise in wage rate and fall in MPPL together tends to rise the marginal cost of production. Thus, marginal cost of firms increases as more labor is employed due to diminishing MPP of labor and also because wage rate rises. In figure X, that with the initial aggregate demand curve AD0 and the given aggregate supply curve AS, the price level is A0 and output level is B0. Now suppose the aggregate demand curve increases from AD0 to AD1, it will be seen that price level rises to A1 and aggregate national output increases from B0 to B1. The rise in the price level A0 to A1 results in reduction of unemployment rate and hence proving an inverse relation between the two. Now, if aggregate demand increases to AD2, the price level further rises to A2 and national output increases to B2, which will further lower the rate of unemployment. Thus, a higher rate of increase in aggregate demand and consequently higher rate of rise in price level is associated with the lower rate of unemployment and vice versa. This is what is represented by Phillips curve. In figure Y, where point A dash on downward sloping Phillips curve corresponding to point A of figure X. In figure Y, it is observed that the rate of unemployment is equal to U3 corresponding to price level A0 of X. When aggregate demand shifts to AD1, a certain rate of inflation is observed and price level rises to A1 followed by expansion in aggregate output to B1. As it can be observed that this increase in aggregate output boosts the employment in the economy and hence leads to decline in unemployment rate. Now, when the rate of price level increases from A0 to A1 in figure X following the increase in aggregate demand greater than the rate of rise in the price level of the previous period, a lower rate of unemployment U2 is obtained higher than the corresponding to the previous period, with still a higher rate of inflation, say A2. When price level rises from A1 to A2 in figure X following the increase in AD to AD2, we have a further lower rate of unemployment equal to U1 in figure Y corresponding to C dash on the Phillips curve PC. This gives us a downward sloping curve. Now, let us understand short run and long run Phillips curve. It is important to know the relationship between short run Phillips curve and long run Phillips curve. The position of the short run Phillips curve SPC, which passes through a point on the long run Phillips curve LPC, depends on the anticipated inflation rate. Short run Phillips curve is like the short run aggregate supply curve SAS, which is drawn with given expected price level. In long run, the Phillips curve is a vertical line at nominal unemployment rate, which is considered as natural by the policy makers. Here in this case, we assumed it to be 5%. Whereas in short run Phillips curve, an anticipated inflation rate changes as observed in the figure here. If the expected inflation rate is 9% a year, then as will be seen in the figure, the SPC 0 passes through the corresponding point A on the LPC with natural unemployment rate of 5%. The movement along a short run Phillips curve occurs as a result of changes in aggregate demand. When there is unanticipated increase in aggregate demand, inflation rate rises more than the expected rate and gross national product increases, causing a fall in unemployment rate. We move upward to the left from point A on the short run Phillips curve SPC 0. On the other hand, when there is unanticipated decrease in aggregate demand, inflation rate falls and unemployment rate increases above the natural rate, and as a result, we move downward to the right from point A along the short run Phillips curve SPC 0. However, when the expected inflation rate changes, the SPC shifts. As shown in the figure, if the expected inflation rate falls to 6% a year, the SPC shifts below SPC 1. The new SPC passes through long run Phillips curve at the new expected inflation rate of 6%. The distance by which the short run Phillips curve shifts to a lower position is equal to the change in the expected rate of inflation. Friends, let us now understand shift in the Phillips curve. To check this inflation rate, the central bank of a country will take steps to lower the growth in money supply. As a result, actual inflation rate falls to 6% per annum. However, at first, the fall in actual inflation rate is unanticipated, and therefore the wages and other input prices continues to rise at their original rate consistent with 9% expected inflation rate, and there is rightward movement along the short run Phillips curve SPC 0, resulting in fall in gross national product and increase in unemployment rate. However, when the inflation rate remains steady at 6% per annum, this rate eventually comes to be anticipated. As this happens, increase in wage rate and other input prices slow down, and with the expected increase in aggregate demand, gross national product increases and unemployment rate falls to the natural level. As a result, the short run Phillips curve shifts downward to the new position SPC 1 that corresponds to the new lower expected inflation rate of 6% per annum, as already noticed in the diagram. Next topic is short run Phillips curve. The consequent increase in aggregate demand will cause the rate of inflation to rise, say, to 7%. Suppose that the level of wage rate is fixed at 5% rate of inflation. It is expected that this rate of inflation is going to continue to occur higher price level. Since the actual rate of inflation has exceeded the expected rate of inflation, expansion in the profits of firms is observed. Hence, in the anticipation of the profits earned at the higher price level, businesses will hire more labor to fulfill the increase in aggregate demand. Thus, the economy will move to point A1 on the curve SPC1. In the figure, it is observed where unemployment has decreased to 3.5% while inflation rate has risen to 7%. It may be noted from the figure that in moving from A0 to A1 on SPC1, the economy accepts a higher rate of inflation as the cost of achieving a lower rate of unemployment. Thus, this is in conformity with the concept of Phillips curve. However, the advocates of natural unemployment rate theory interprets it in a slightly different way. They think that lower rate of unemployment achieved is only a temporary phenomena. They think when the actual rate of inflation exceeds the one that is expected, unemployment rate will fall below the natural rate only in short run. In the long run, the natural rate of unemployment will be restored. Let us now take a new topic of natural unemployment rate hypothesis and adaptive expectation. Friedman challenged the concept of a stable downward sloping Phillips curve. He argued that there is no long run stable trade-off between rate of inflation and unemployment. According to Friedman's natural rate hypothesis, though there is trade-off between inflation and unemployment in the short run, the economy is stable in the long run at the natural rate of unemployment. It is necessary to explain the concept of natural rate of unemployment on which the concept of long run Phillips curve is based. The natural rate of unemployment is the rate at which in the labor market the current number of unemployed is equal to the number of jobs available. These unemployed workers are not employed for the frictional and structural reasons, though the equivalent number of jobs are available for them. Now let us understand Phillips curve and adaptive expectations. Friedman put forward a theory of adaptive expectations according to which people form their expectations on the basis of previous period rate of inflation and change or adapt their expectations only when the actual inflation turns out to be different from their expected rate. According to this theory, there may be a trade-off between rates of inflation and unemployment in the short run, but there is no such trade-off in long run. The view of Friedman and his followers monetarists illustrated the Phillips curve as SPC1 and economy is at point A0 on it corresponding to the natural rate of unemployment equal to 5% of the labor force in the figure. The location of this point A0 on the short run Phillips curve depends on the level of aggregate demand. Further, we assume that the economy has been experiencing a rate of inflation equal to 5%. The other assumption we make is that nominal wages have been set on the expectation that 5% rate of inflation will continue in the future. Let us now understand long run Phillips curve. Now suppose in the long run for some reasons the government adopts expansionary fiscal and monetary policies to raise aggregate demand. This brings us to the concept of long run Phillips curve which have been put forward by the economists. According to them, the economy will not remain in a stable equilibrium position at A1. This is because the workers will realize that due to the higher rate of inflation than the expected one, their real wages and incomes have fallen. The workers will therefore demand higher nominal wages to restore their real income. But as nominal wages rise to compensate for the higher rate of inflation than expected, profits of business firm will fall to their earlier levels. This reduction in their profits implies that the original motivation that promoted them to expand output and increase employment, resulting in lower unemployment rate, will no longer be there. Consequently, they will reduce employment till the unemployment rate rises to the natural level of 5%. That is, with the increase in nominal wages, in the figure, the economy will move from A1 to B0 at a higher inflation rate of 7%. It may be noted that the higher level of aggregate demand, which generated inflation rate of 7% and caused the economy to shift from A0 to A1, still persists. Further, at B0 and with the actual rate of inflation equal to 7%, the workers will now expect this 7% inflation rate to continue in future. As a result, the SPC shifts upward from SPC 1 to SPC 2. According to Friedman and the other natural rate theorists, the movement along a Phillips curve, short-run Phillips curve, is only temporary. In the long run, when nominal wages are fully adjusted to the changes in the inflation rate and consequently unemployment rate comes back to its natural level, a new short-run Phillips curve is formed at the higher expected rate of inflation. However, the above process of reduction in the unemployment rate and then its returning to the natural level may continue further. With the new increase in aggregate demand, the price level will rise further with nominal wages lagging behind in the short run. As a result, profits of business firm will increase and they will expand output and employment, causing the reduction in the rate of unemployment and rise in the inflation rate. With this, the economy will move from B0 to B1 along the SPC 2. After some time, the workers will recognize the fall in their real wages and press for higher nominal wages to compensate for the higher rate of inflation than expected. When these higher nominal wages are granted, the business profits decline, which will cause the level of employment to fall and unemployment rate of return to the natural rate of 5%. That is, the economy moves from B1 to C0. The new short-run Phillips curve will now shift to SPC 3, passing through C0. The process may be repeated again with the result that while in the short run, the unemployment rate falls below the natural rate and in the long run, it returns to its natural rate. But throughout this process, the inflation rate continuously goes on rising. On joining points such as A0, B0, C0 corresponding to the given natural rate unemployment, we get a vertical long-run Phillips curve. Thus, in the adaptive expectation theory of natural rate hypothesis, while the short-run Phillips curve is downward sloping, indicating that trade-off between inflation and unemployment rate in the short run, the long-run Phillips curve is a vertical straight line, showing that no trade-off exists between inflation and unemployment in the long run. So friends, in today's session, we understood the problem of inflation and unemployment prevailing in the developing countries, the dilemma faced by policymakers in controlling rate of inflation and rate of unemployment. We understood how this dilemma has been answered by A.W. Philip by inflation and unemployment trade-off Phillips curve. We also made efforts to understand the shifts in Phillips curve and difference in short-run and long-run Phillips curve. So friends, hope you enjoyed the learning session today. Thank you.